There's always that phone call that you dread, the one that brings you news you wish you could turn back time on. Except that mine didn't come via phone call. Mine came via breaking headline news splattered across every news agency around the world. It was a beautiful Sunday morning. I was getting ready for mosque. I had dressed up my baby girl. She had a bow in her head. I don't do bows. And I picked up my mother, and we headed to mosque. My father was on a flight back from Canada. We were going to meet him after. As I settled in, I felt a tap on my shoulder. It was a volunteer from our community letting me know that my car was still turned on. I knew that already. My husband was waiting for us in the car. A few minutes later, I felt another tap on my shoulder. It was the same volunteer letting me know that he was calling me outside. Frustrated, I picked up my daughter and I just stomped out of the prayer hall. What could be so important that couldn't wait until after prayers were done? As soon as I saw his face, I knew something was wrong. He was holding up the phone and he asked me, "Isn't your father on this flight?" I didn't know what that question meant. What do you mean, isn't my father on this flight? He should have landed by now. He was on his way home. We were having lunch together. So, of course, I called his phone, and it rang and rang and rang and rang. Details of that day are very blurry and very clear at the same time. One thing I knew for sure, I have no idea what I had done with my baby girl. And second thing I knew for sure is I had never experienced that kind of a heartbreak before. Calling my brother in Canada and letting him know was my second heartbreak of the day. Breaking the news to my mother was my third heartbreak of the day. By the time we got home, news had spread like wildfire. Friends, family, even strangers were showing up at the door. Every sound was like a firecracker inside my head. But I still had hope, you know. Maybe he missed his flight and just decided to explore Ethiopia. Maybe this was fake news. We did live in an era of fake news, right? But deep down inside, I knew that that day was changing my life forever. And then my mind decided to paint. It painted the sky and it painted the sun. It painted the aircraft. It painted the inside of the aircraft. It painted the passengers. It painted the luggage cabins. It painted the oxygen masks falling. It even painted the air hostesses balancing on one foot. You've seen that painting before. It's known as Hollywood. And then it painted my daddy. Knowing that this was it. This is us a few years ago. Imagine the sun, a bright, warm sun. What would happen if somebody took away the sun from us? We would be plunged in complete darkness, right? It would get cold, maybe even colder than a Canadian or a British winter. That day felt like somebody had taken away the sun from me. That day was 10th of March, 2019. In the days and weeks and months that followed, I felt negative emotions just take over completely. I felt pain, anger, sadness. This was supposed to be some of the best moments of my life. I was nurturing a newborn, but instead I got lost in changing her diapers and feeding her and putting her back to sleep. I got lost in cleaning out my father's closet, and I got lost in the eyes of a woman I called Mom. In October 2019, we were told that remains had been found, so I flew to Canada with my daughter for a burial ceremony. Then I flew back on the same route my father was on, from Addis to Nairobi. My mind painted again, and this time, my daughter and I were in the painting. On the 10th of March, 2020, I flew back to Ethiopia to commemorate the first year anniversary of the plane crash. And when I got there, I couldn't believe what I saw. We drove out into a town called Bishoftu. There's a little village called Tulifera, and it was just absolutely breathtaking. And in that moment, I suddenly felt this presence that was larger than me. And it made sense to me why my father had chosen that place to transition into the next phase of his life. I'm a very outdoorsy person by nature. And in that moment, I felt this connection, this sudden connection to this presence. And I want to share a little bit about that experience with you. So I invite you to close your eyes or just lower your gaze if that makes you uncomfortable. And just take a deep breath in. And as you exhale, release any tension, let go of anything that you're holding on to, and just relax in your seat. Take another deep breath in, following your breath through your nose right into your belly. And as you exhale, just follow your breath out once again. Taking another deep breath in. And as you exhale, give yourself permission to be completely and fully present with me as your guide for the next few moments. Imagine a bubble, a large pulsating bubble. You are inside this bubble, where it is safe. Let the bubble float out into the desert and begin to notice your surroundings. There's mountains in the distance. There's trees. Some are tall, some are short. They're gently swaying in the breeze. You can feel the caress of the wind on your skin. There's a crowd in the distance. They're not loud, they're not soft, they just are. You can smell the desert. You can even taste a little bit of the sand in your mouth. There's no time, there is no space. There just is you, being life itself, unfolding moment to moment. Taking another deep breath in, you can step out of the bubble and slowly open your eyes and come back to the room. That day, when I fell into that stillness, into that gap, I suddenly felt like I was given this power to choose my emotions. It was magical. I saw a path of how I wanted to spend the rest of my life with my father. I saw a path full of pain, grief, depression, even revenge. Then I saw a path full of happiness, joy, even gratitude, just for a moment. Viktor Frankl says that between stimulus and response, there's a space. And in that space is our power to choose our response. In our response lies our growth and our freedom. Viktor Frankl was a Holocaust survivor. He empowered his fellow inmates and told them that life was still worth living. If Viktor Frankl could choose his freedom under the most outrageous conditions of our human history, what choice was I going to make to live my life without my father? You see, we're constantly choosing our emotions. We just don't know we're choosing our emotions. How many of us have told ourselves, I don't have a choice about the situations? And because of that, we are stuck in negative emotions that are stemming from an event of the past. And then we're stuck in negative emotions of fear and anxiety from an event of the unknown future. We are rarely ever present in this moment, right here, right now. And in this moment is where the power to choose our emotions lies. And because of that, a different part of our mind makes that choice for us, and that is a subconscious mind. Even when the choice is the most obvious choice, we still end up picking the one that is least favorable to us. Why is this? It's because we are unable to spend time in the gap, in that presence, long enough to be able to pick the emotions that are more empowering. That day, when I fell into this gap space in Ethiopia, I wanted to find out a little bit more about it. So my research led me to a process known as mindfulness. And when I began to practice mindfulness, I started to step into this gap more often. And the more I stepped into this gap, I started to spend more time in it. And then with that time, I started to see the choices in front of me, the consequences of each choice in front of me, and then I started to pick the ones that were more favorable. On the 10th of March, 2021, 2 years after the crash, I felt the emotions of that day take over once again. My thoughts, my mind, my body, my feelings. But this time, I knew how to step into the gap, and so I did, consciously with awareness. And from the space in the gap, I was able to see my thoughts, emotions, and feelings in front of me. And I could tell that these were just thoughts. They were not my reality, they were just thoughts. Don't get me wrong, my grief was still very, very raw, but my thoughts were not real. You have to experience sorrow, but you don't need to stay there. And so I decided that I was going to move my life without my father in freedom and in wisdom. How do you access this gap? You do that by the practice of mindfulness, which is the return to the present moment over and over and over again. You break away from the autopilot that we live in when we're stuck in the past or the future, and you come back into the present moment by slowing down, stopping, observing your thoughts, emotions, and feelings, and letting your breath ground you into the present moment, awakening all your senses, just the way we did in the earlier visualization process that I took you through. In essence, I'm asking you to lose your mind and fall into your senses. How do you stay in the gap long enough? You practice every single day. From today, you've all begun your practice here with me. Now you have no excuse. You go home and you continue. Even if it's just for 1 minute a day, you practice. And the more you practice, the more you'll start to spend this time in the gap. It gets longer and longer. And when you do that, you loosen the power that the subconscious mind has over you. And when you do that, you're taking your power back, and with the power in your hands, you are able to see the choices in front of you. You can then choose your emotions. You see, we will always be faced with obstacles, challenges, tragedies. We will find ourselves in situations where we do not have a choice. I didn't have a choice when I found myself in the situation on that day when I lost my father. What I do have a choice about, and what you also have a choice about, is how you want to relate to that situation. What you do have a choice about is a story you tell yourself around that situation. What you do have a choice about is the relationship you create with that situation. Are you going to let that situation control you? Are you going to let that situation grow you? So today, ladies and gentlemen, when you leave, what choices are you going to revisit? What emotions are you going to revisit so that you are able to lead the life that you want to have? Thank you.